Hands-on, feet on, powered on your mark. On is the start of everything. On is the key to learning. Being on an environment, not just in it. Being on the world, not just of it.
Tarkett understands how important On is.
We work on it every day. On the ground with you, designing flooring experiences to grow on, dream on, and get on with it.
Okay, hello. Thank you for joining our session today. We will be presenting a session about well and biophilia and its application to learning environments. So just to give a little bit of context about the topic that we're going to be talking about today, I think we can all intuitively understand the benefits of nature. And I just want to share with you a beautiful quote from Frederick Law Olmsted about speaking about Yosemite, which I think summarizes it very nicely. Enjoyment of the scenery employs the mind without fatigue and yet exercises it. It tranquilizes and yet enlivens it. And thus, through the influence of the mind over the body, gives the effect of refreshing rest and reinvigoration to the whole system. So as humans, we all have an innate tendency to seek out that connection with nature, which in turn rewards us with numerous psychological, physiological, and cognitive benefits, including our intellectual capacity, stress reduction, and creativity, and a general sense of well-being. And yet we live now in a world where we spend 90% of our time indoors, increasingly reliant on technology, disconnected from nature, disconnected from each other, and ultimately, I would say disconnected then from ourselves. And that disconnection is linked to rising rates of anxiety, stress, as well as the decline of traditional sources of community. So in this session, we will explore how to apply this kind of thinking and strategies to the learning environment, and specifically how the well building standard is supported by biophilic design strategies. And to talk through this topic, so these are some of the learning outcomes that we'll be hitting on as we go through our presentation. And I'm very happy to be pleased to be joined by a couple of presenters. Get the slide to advance. I'm Maeva Donnan. I'm a partner with KSS Architects. I design learning environments and community spaces, and I'm joined by Jesse and Angela. Jesse, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, pleasure to be here. My name is Jesse Rosenbluth. I work with Omni Ecosystems, and we're a green infrastructure company that does work building green roofs and other types of green infrastructure across the country.
Great, Angela?
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here as well. Angela Spangler. I am the education sector lead at the International Well Building Institute.
Okay, great. So before we get into a lot of detail, we wanted to just talk about why. Why does this matter? Why should you be interested? Why should you be doing this right now? So I think right now, we can all appreciate and acknowledge that the COVID pandemic has brought an increased focus on wellness and the role of buildings in our overall health. And I think we've all gained a whole new appreciation for outdoor spaces and how they can support learning. If you look at these kids, I think this is a wonderful slide, that not just the play, but also the range of different learning experiences that you can have from being outside and from connecting with nature. And I would like to think that, integrating, while the current pandemic may be putting more focus and more emphasis on wellness and on health, integrating well and principles of biophilic design yield numerous benefits. And so this is a good thing to think about implementing in your own school, regardless, of whether we were in a pandemic or not. And Jesse, I know you have a lot of really great data to share that really supports, some of the outcomes that we see.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, just to reiterate, biophilia is a term that describes humans' innate tendency to seek out and interact with nature. And when biophilia is applied as a design principle to learning environments, there's an array of benefits, both to the function of the building and the surrounding ecosystems, which we'll get into as well, but also critically to the direct physical and mental well-being of the students, teachers, administrators within those environments, especially in urban landscapes, where there may be a lack of green space for people to interact with. That importance of incorporating biophilic design becomes even more pronounced. And this is not just an intuitive leap. They're in three overarching mind-body systems: cognitive, psychological, and physiological, there's a growing body of research being explored and verified to varying degrees in both laboratory and field studies that's linking the benefits of biophilia to people's health and well-being. And pardon the small print, but I did want to provide some of these specific examples to remind everyone that the health benefits of biophilia are concrete and well worth mentioning. So cognitive functioning encompasses our mental agility and memory and our ability to think, learn, and output either logically or creatively. For instance, directed attention is required for many repetitive tasks, such as routine paperwork, reading and performing calculations or analysis, as well as operating in highly stimulating environments, such as when you're crossing a busy street, for example. So directed attention is energy intensive and over time can result in mental fatigue and depleted cognitive resources. So strong or routine connections with nature actually help provide opportunities for mental restoration, during which you can then afterwards have higher cognitive function and be able to increase your capacity performing focused tasks. And then also there's psychological benefits. We have emotional responses that impact our adaptability, alertness, attention, and concentration. This includes responses to nature that impact restoration and stress management. For instance, empirical studies have reported the experiences of natural environments provide greater emotional restoration with lower instances of tension, anxiety, anger, fatigue, confusion, and total mood disturbance than urban environments, which have limited characteristics of nature. And this also impacts us on a physiological level, where responses encompass our oral, our musculoskeletal, respiratory, and circadian rhythms, basically our overall physical comfort. Physiological responses triggered by connections with nature include relaxation of muscles, as well as lowering of diastolic blood pressure and stress hormones, i.e. cortisol levels in bloodstreams. So those systems need to be tested, but only enough for the body to remain resilient and adaptive. And nature provides a psychological respite so that these systems can be restored over time before any type of damage occurs. Now, what those benefits of biophilia translate into are really, again, concrete kind of communal benefits. So presenteeism costs employers money every year as employees check out of the workplace because they're unable to concentrate. And students learn faster, even just with increasing daylight and bringing more light into buildings. So these benefits have these direct kind of outcomes: faster learning rates, higher attention spans, and lower stress levels by being integrated into the built environment.
And it's really great to see this data also, that really supports the, over 150 years later, what Frederick Law Olmsted was observing, that, we can now measure it in a completely different way. That's great.
Absolutely. And that's also, I think, kind of hinting at the overall complexity of ecological systems. These are vast systems, so all the benefits, we're continuing to see this be proven again and again in different ways. We see this in terms of noise reduction. Living walls incorporated into building structures reduce noise. The sound of water is soothing. They also help clean air. So we're finding all these different metrics that for years we didn't even realize we should be tabulating, and we're finding benefits. So the continued implementation of biophilia is just continuing to show more and more benefits overall for communities. And for us, one of the biggest takeaways then is that's why we build structures to look like this, to build buildings and learning environments where you can have a roof like this, where you're getting all of those benefits from the biophilic community, not just as an amenity space for an institution, not just for the backdrop of making it look better, but also because you know that you're improving the physical and mental health of the student body and the faculty that are using those spaces as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a great point, and I'd love to build upon that as the WELL representative on the line. So one of the key things that really drew me to the International WELL Building Institute from a background in corporate health and corporate well-being is the fact that the strategies that you'll find in the standard are all aimed at specific improvements, looking to improve human health outcomes. So whether it's kind of moving the needle or shifting the focus from reacting and responding to medical emergencies? How are you more proactive in the design, in the maintenance, and the construction and organization of a space to really put the human needs first and prioritize learning outcomes for students, better work environments for educators, and overall a greater sense of community in the buildings that we're designing and occupying?
It's a great segue. So we want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into what is WELL? What is it all about?
Certainly, yes. So if you'll drive to the next slide, the organization that I work for is the International Well Building Institute. It is the leading certification organization focused on exactly that, human health outcomes. If you'll go to the next slide, I'll talk you a little bit through the development of WELL and how we got here. So this really all started when our founders thought, why don't we bring together some of the leading scientists, leading medical professionals, and leading engineers and building designers and put them in the same room and get them to start this same conversation, given everything that you know about design and construction and the physical environments that we occupy, and then given everything that you know about the human body, how can we create a space or an environment that is actually health promoting, that people will leave feeling better than when they arrived on site in the morning? And so after 6 years of lots and lots of research, the first version of WELL was introduced in 2014. It had a focus on workplaces, so a commercial application. And we started with about 7.7 million square feet of real estate. It's in our name, the International Well Building Institute. So we've grown wildly over time, first with introducing a community concept, or a community standard rather, that looks at neighborhood and district scale interventions. So going beyond just what an individual building can do to keep you healthy and safe, but talking about how neighborhoods could function in a higher state. Then, about a month after I joined the organization, we introduced the WELL version 2 pilot, which was reworked in a way to apply the learnings from the first version of WELL and replicate it across all different space types. Think schools, hospitals, airports, retail centers, any space where humans exist could benefit from making these types of enhancements. Over time, we introduced the WELL Portfolio program, which I'll dive into in a little bit more detail later with some of our project examples. But ultimately, what you need to know about that is that it offered organizations a really unique and flexible way to engage with the strategies in WELL. So rather than chasing one building certification at a time, organizations could enroll their entire portfolio and work through some of these strategies, one concept at a time, one feature at a time, one policy at a time, kind of meeting them where they're at and celebrating the journey towards healthier environments over time. And it was about a month ago that we just graduated WELL V2 from its pilot form into its full standard. And I'm excited to share more detail with that later. So I mentioned we started with 7.5 million square feet. We are now in over 660 million square feet in 64 countries around the world, encompassing 4,700 unique project types. This has been a remarkable past, 6 months or so. It's kind of crazy, but we've introduced about 1 million square feet of projects per day since March. And that's due in large part to this global health pandemic that we're all in. We're finally shifting this conversation from wellness and these health-focused strategies being a nice to have to really being a need to have, and understanding how to holistically support human health outcomes. So just to give you kind of a sense of the ecosystem, the different ways that our clients are engaging with us so far, before. I mentioned, I'll go big and kind of drill down. So I mentioned the portfolio program. That's the most flexible and comprehensive way to engage. WELL certification should be hopefully familiar to many of you who are tuning in. That's like the gold standard for health-focused building certification systems for all different space types. In this post-COVID environment, we've actually introduced a new WELL Health Safety rating, which focuses in on a subset of the features within WELL version 2 and looks through things like cleaning and sanitization, emergency preparedness, things that are really timely and relevant to this moment that we're in, to respond and instill a sense of confidence that at some point it will be safe to reoccupy these facilities. So those who are participating in the rating are using a third party to verify compliance with these recommendations. If you'll go to the next slide for me here. So for those who may not be as familiar with the WELL Building Standard or WELL version 2, I wanted to kind of orient you to this 10 concept framework that covers everything from design interventions to policy interventions to maintenance and operations of the buildings that we occupy, that we spend 90% of our lives in. One of the key differences in WELL from other rating systems is that these strategies are performance verified on site. So we're setting the regulation around air quality and water quality and the temperature and the acoustical parameters of a space and having somebody come on site and verify compliance. There are also other strategies, which we're going to dive into a bit more detail here in the MIND concept, if you'll go to the next slide, that look more towards the policy related piece. So what you'll see in the MIND concept is there will be strategies that are around focus and sleep support and attention. And while that ties into the lighting strategies, having more access to daylight, because we know that will improve mood, it will improve attention, and it will actually help people sleep better at night. There's policy related documents that would exist within that MIND concept category for WELL. I want to talk a little bit on this next slide actually about mental health. And mental health is really this state of well-being where each and every individual realizes their full potential and can effectively cope with the normal stressors. They can work productively and they can contribute to their community. As we're kind of having this conversation, this virtual conversation, I want to pose a couple of questions to you. You know, prior to COVID, what was a normal stressor in our daily life? How has that changed over the past 6 months or so? How are people handling the stressors in their daily lives? With the lack of normalcy, the lack of routine, many people have kind of lost a lot of what kept them grounded and kept their mental health in check. So how are organizations, how are school institutions, how are your corporations supporting you through these types of transitions? I like to talk for a minute about things like positive stress that causes our bodies to release certain hormones that respond to these environmental stressors and essentially keep us alive and alert. Think like your fight or flight mode. You know, prior to us all spending our days in the physical environment, some of our stressors could be things like encountering a bear out in the wild, right? Where you have to respond immediately. You have to decide, are you going to take this on? Are you going to get away from this bear? Well, when your body goes into that mode, your cortisol levels spike and all of your non-critical body systems kind of take a back seat. So your need to digest food, your need to reproduce, your need to think through, your relationships, all of that takes the back burner in those types of environments. Well, today, our stressors are a lot more constant. So it's really important that we're focusing on things like coping mechanisms and other environmental cues that can help us to keep those stress levels down, just so that we can continue to maintain a positive and a healthy state of mental health and well-being. If you'll go into this next slide, we'll get into a little bit more of what the World Health Organization defines mental health as. This is something that is fundamental to human health. It's essential across all life stages. So no matter how old we are, this is something that's really important to address. And it's determined by a range of different factors. So your socioeconomic status, your biological factors, and your environmental factors all play into your overall mental health. As I mentioned in the example on the past slide about escaping from the bear in this fight or flight mode, the state that we're in, the state of stress, the state of being under constant pressure is directly linked to our biology and conditions a series of other health behaviors. If you go to the next slide, we can talk about different ways that we can design spaces to actually support our mental health. So with this, I want you to think about things like wayfinding. How easy is it to navigate a space when you're, back in the day traveling and going to an airport? There are different cues in the physical environment that can make getting from point A to point B a relaxed and stress-free process, or something that could be stress-inducing and anxiety-producing. So these are the types of things that we're thinking about in the recommendations that we're putting forward in that MIND concept. Another strategy is things like spatial adjustment. So whether or not we have an individualized locus of control or an external locus of control, how many choice and variety do we have in terms of seating options in a space, and what that does to our own mental health and well-being. It's also important to think about how many restorative spaces are available in the buildings that we occupy. So the differences between spaces that are really overly stimulating and those that can actually recharge us, and how that varies on a person-to-person and individualized spectrum. So finally, access to nature, or the connection to nature, and biophilia is one of the strategies that's actually required of all of those 4,700 projects in the 64 countries around the world, rather. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the way that our standard is organized is between features that are required and features that are optional. And all of these decisions are made by a panel of experts, our concept leads, our expert concept advisories, and they're weighted for impact. So any of the features that are non-negotiable have a clear and direct health benefit that should exist across every single project that has the WELL certification mark. And this feature that is a required feature is not just about how many plants do you have indoors, but it's about all sorts of different design elements, like access to nature, whether it's indirect or direct, whether it's the use of different materials, natural related materials, different patterns, different sounds, different colors, the amount of light within the space, if there's water within the space, what types of views are available to the project team. So I won't drill down any further than that for this example, but I would encourage you all to explore the digital standard online and learn more about the impact of biophilia on all different WELL projects. I'm going to talk you through a couple of different examples as it relates to the school setting. So in the next slide, as the education sector lead, I get really excited to talk about these. So the very first of dozens of projects that have been registered and pursuing certification all over the world, the very first to achieve certification in the education sector was actually Untitled #1. It's a nature-based preschool and child learning and development center that we'll get into shortly. And then I also want to share the story of Orrville School District's portfolio commitment. So, Untitled number 1, they decided from the onset that they were interested in pursuing well as this conversation to move past the traditional sustainability conversation. In California, it is fairly common for most buildings to go for things like LEED certification and focus on environmental sustainability. But at this school, they really wanted to push the envelope and take it on to this next level, this human-focused design. So I want to share a quote with you from the founder of the school. She says, "School is a living and changing thing. At Untitled number 1, we actively value innovation and research, which means that we play our part as researchers to also innovate in our practice of teaching and learning. We will always seek out who is doing what to improve the well-being of both the people and the planet." And that's a really important point. WELL certification comes onto the scene as a yes and. We never really want to force anyone's hand to think environmental sustainability versus human sustainability, but rather to think bigger about how both of these systems are linked. So I wanted to share a couple of images from this school. Here you can see just how natural the landscaping and the environment is for the playgrounds and the outdoor spaces on site here. They've got learning gardens available. They've got outdoor play, indoor play, structured learning time, unstructured learning time, and this beautiful space to really encourage kids to think differently about how they're engaging with each other and using this building. If you'll go to the next slide, you can see that there's strong ties to nature through the materials that they're using in the physical environment, as well as the planning phases. So thinking through light exposure, views, the different color palettes, the different materials that are being used here. And the next slide too, you'll even see how those materials are taken a bit further, and they've got these beautiful murals on the wall, the different patterns in the rugs and the furniture showing the natural wood. And all of these strategies in combination have these profound kind of effects on reducing that stress and keeping people feeling more of that tie and that connection to nature. Now, as we switch gears and talk a little bit about the Orrville School District, many people might think, sure, it's nice to have the opportunity to decide you're doing well from day one and design a building to it to incorporate these strategies. But what is true is that most of the real estate that exists in the world already exists today. These buildings are already constructed. So another approach at incorporating wellness is through that portfolio approach, thinking through how you're going to make each future choice in the lens of health and well-being. So here, this was actually the first portfolio to sign on in a post-COVID environment. The motivations here were just to create a healthier environment for the educators, for the students, for the community. There's a quote on this screen here that I'll share with you from the founder, the funder of this portfolio, a local car dealer, who says they've been in this community for over 40 years, and we understand that kids are walking the halls of those schools are the future of Orrville. That's really what made this an easy decision. So talking about prevention, investing in your future generation, investing in kids' health was something that really motivated them. So if we click through, you can see the schools that are enrolled here. This is their elementary school. They've got lots of great daylight, their middle school here, and their high school located here. And they're essentially going through the different 10 concept areas of well and strategically and incrementally making improvements over time. So with that, I will hand it back over to you to get into some additional project examples.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's great. And it's great to see the building, the application of well in existing buildings, that you can really understand through the lifespan of a project, whether you're in early design stages or have space that's been built, you're undertaking a major renovation, or you're undertaking minor modifications. It's great to be able to see the application of some of those strategies. We wanted to also just talk a little bit about the earlier stages. If you are in the design process, if you're contemplating new construction or a major renovation, where we always start as architects with our clients is we start with a visioning process. And really what's important there is to identify the health and performance priorities for the school. And that comes through a very wide-ranging conversation that draws in a lot of different stakeholders, the whole community, from students, faculty, parents, to talk about a whole range of different issues and give them the opportunity to give free input. So this is just an example. This can take a lot of different, formats, from a town hall meeting to being things that are more interactive. We've done a lot of sessions with people where we give them images and post-it notes and just let them write all over it and react to some of the ideas that, some of which may be applicable or not applicable, but it's really to open the mind to the range of possibilities that you can get into. And the goal of doing that early visioning is to have that broad conversation that lets you talk about your aspirations and your goals for the project. And if you don't give yourself permission to kind of think broadly at a very large, potentially at a very big scale, you'll never do it, right? So giving yourself permission to start with that big picture, to identify the aspirations and the goals and how that relates, how that project then can support the overall mission of the school is a very important thing to do. So, and once you've identified there, some of the alignments of your project with your mission, then you can begin thinking about the nature of the spaces that you're going to be designing and what best supports your curriculum. What are your aspirations for classrooms? What are your aspirations for multi-use or for the kind of opportunities you want to offer children? Do you want to be able to offer them the opportunity to garden, for example, because it supports hands-on learning that can be applied to math and science, as well as being outside and giving them that change of environment. Then you can begin to drill down a little bit more on those strategies. And we oftentimes at that point we'll get into a little bit of a more specific visioning session where we talk about integration through charrette sessions. And I know, Jesse, you've got a very well-honed process for doing that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Certainly, and I think you correctly identified too, you want to be thinking bigly. You want to be thinking about how you can pull in all these wonderful concepts, these well standards, be shooting really high so you can be providing these wonderful amenities and high quality spaces for your clients. And I think actually through a charrette process or cross-disciplinary collaboration, you can often find that these solutions, which are aspirational, can also be pragmatic. And that's something that we've really embraced, looking at the landscaping of green infrastructure. When we look at the addition of green roofs, for example, or living walls or other biophilic elements, we often realize that through a charrette or this collaboration, understanding the programming needs of the space is what allows us to realize the greatest number of benefits to the building and through their users, especially when we view landscapes as not just aesthetic amenities, but that they are working landscapes, that in addition to looking good, they can help manage stormwater to meet code requirements. They can help provide energy efficiencies. They can support resilient plant communities that allow food production or habitat creation, as well as engaging spaces for people that function as both living laboratories as well as areas of respite. And that when green infrastructure is viewed as this multifunctional working landscape and not just a one-dimensional background, it improves building performance, it can reduce costs, and address long-term maintenance concerns. And that really unleashes a lot more potential for its inclusion. And critical in this endeavor is seeking the input and expertise of professionals early and often, very much so understand what the community wants, what the client wants in terms of the programming for that space, but also finding out what is possible. And I think that's always a great part of this. People are often amazed to realize that they can have these green infrastructure components, these biofuel components, that they can be brought in, and that these novel applications and these innovative designs, when you bring in these professionals, you can learn about the constructability and they become very constructible. And you can learn about the maintenance long term, and you can develop programming that allows you to manage the inclusion of these different elements. Specifically, green infrastructure is a biophilic element that when you bring it into urban context, when you bring it into on-structure environments, it does require expertise and careful consideration. But these are projects being built for decades. These are buildings that are going to have a long impact. And so bringing those experts in to think about the lifespan of these projects allows you both to understand the importance of careful construction, as well as the benefits of proper design and high performance over the lifetime of these buildings. And whether it's a new project or it's a renovation, I just really want to always, hammer in that the wide expanse of expertise that can come to bear can be really beneficial. We found whether it's soil environmental scientists, architects, landscape architects, construction managers, maintenance superintendents and stewards, their input becomes really invaluable through these charrettes, through these reiterative design processes to get the most out of these green infrastructure components so that biophilic design can be integrated in a really cost-conscious manner that allows everyone to access these types of amenities.
So I think it would be nice at this point to get into a little bit more detail of some of those project examples. So I'm going to keep going, Jesse. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple. It's always great to talk about the specifics because that's where it gets really exciting. And this was exactly one of those kind of projects where the design and the biophilic design came together to create a whole greater than the sum of its parts. So Stevenson High School was a school outside of Chicago that was looking to integrate some green infrastructure, specifically a green roof, as well as living walls, into the design of a new building. And sitting down and working with the school staff, we discovered that there was a host of concerns about how to make this an infrastructure available to the student body so to have impact. So the architecture team worked side by side with the construction and maintenance staff to think about how we could add a green roof that provides representative biomes for all of Illinois. So it had green roofs that represented prairies, savannas, and farmland. And having these different type of biomes and designing them that they would last a long time and properly perform led to questions about how is this going to be accessible? How are students going to be able to engage with this? So again, working with project engineers and architects, we were able to develop these so that there are different heights to planting beds so that they'd be ADA accessible to students with all types of mobility, and that they would also be safe for classes to go out and utilize these spaces. And then in addition, we had a lot of concerns about how are we going to maintain this? And so we worked with them to develop a farming system that could be accessible for the students during the school year, but in the summer could be converted over into cover crops, could use intelligent irrigation systems to be very low maintenance and very easy for the staff to maintain in the summer breaks when students weren't available to come on site. And what was most amazing about this is this design process was able to provide these 3 different biomes, to provide all types of learning opportunities, and we carefully thought through how it could be accessible, and all those things were kind of finely detailed and then executed. And then the students went ahead and took it to another level of kind of, impressiveness. And the next slide will show that that wasn't even anticipated. So while we had really thought through these maintenance concerns and how we're going to integrate this in the building, it was the students themselves, in my opinion, that made the most impressive use of the space. The school robotics team produced the idea to trial programming drones to harvest crops on the farm section of the roof. So they built and programmed drones to explore how they could navigate the terrain of these farms using different wheel and tread configurations, and then experimented with mounting cameras designed to identify when the colors of crops indicated ripeness to alert harvesters to visit the roof. So this was a wholly unanticipated programming element that came out of this space, which was really fantastic. And I'm a former farmer myself, and so it was actually a fairly startling version of the future of urban agriculture. But one thing that was interesting to me about this was that we often think about green infrastructure in terms of the impact of people who will be directly in it, sitting on it, experiencing it. This was a project where the students came up with the idea in their classrooms, removed from it, but just the fact that there was access, that there was green infrastructure, there was this biophilic element on the campus, stimulated a line of thinking for them that was wholly novel and allowed them to apply their skills and knowledge in a new manner. And so that is one of the surprises these living laboratories can provide, which is always really incredible. And even all that forethought and that design work, which gives you a really high functioning ecosystem, this is what it allows you to do with it later on. And another example of that, I'll bet a very different one, was this wheat roof crop. So this was a project where this was actually an install, and it was late in the season, and there were concerns about getting all the plants established as it got cold. This was also in Chicago. And so we actually used a wheat cover crop. And this was able to allow the project to stay on its construction timeline just for a couple handfuls of wheat that were broadcast in the fall. And it worked out beautifully. And when we came in the spring, this wheat cover crop, which was there just to let us keep moving on the project, had ripened into an actual wheat field, which we were astounded that it did so well. And so we said, well, this is fantastic. And this gives us an opportunity to actually harvest the wheat. And so, the point of this, the next slide will show you the end product, which was this meadow, which it reverted to, which is what the client originally wanted. This was actually a construction tool using wheat to build this meadow out with trees. So it'd be this wonderful amenity space. But when we saw the wheat was there, we realized that we had this tremendous opportunity to harvest it. So in between, when you saw the wheat field and this meadow emerge, we actually went on this roof with the students, working with the After School Matters program in Chicago. The students actually went up on this roof and they hand harvested this wheat. So they took this wheat, they harvested off the roof. Never has a group of students been more unhappy. We woke them up at 5 a.m. We said, we're going on a roof. They said, why are we doing this? We said, we promise this is going to be fun. We started harvesting wheat. They're like, why are we doing this? We said, we're going to make cookies. They said, there's no way we're making cookies cutting grass on a roof. We said, just hang with us, we promise. So we cut this wheat, we took it back to the warehouse, and then we asked the students to do something that I guarantee they'd never been asked to do before. We asked them to thresh and winnow the wheat. They looked at us and said, what's threshing, what's winnowing? We said, you're smart, you'll figure it out. So they Googled it. They figured out how to thresh and winnow wheat right there in the warehouse using boards to bang the wheat against itself. They got really creative. They actually put the wheat in buckets then, and they took drills and attached chains to the end of the drills, and they would thrash around, separating the wheat. They then dumped it on a table and set fans to blow the chaff away, resulting in an actual harvest of wheat. They got a milled wheat product. In the next slide, you'll see their output, which they then went and got milled. And the students were amazed. They're watching this process in front of their eyes. It gets milled. They get a flour product. There's about a 3,000 square foot roof. They got 60 pounds of flour. They used this to bake cookies, which was its own kind of wonderful experiment. And then they did a bake sale to support the After School Matters program. And the mayor of Chicago actually came, Rahm Emanuel, to visit with the students. And he was supposed to be there for 30 minutes, but he ended up staying for 3 hours because he had such a great time hearing from the students about how they had taken this living laboratory and used this wheat, which is only meant as a construction tool, a temporary stopgap measure until it could turn into the meadow it was to become, to have this great experience, learn about how to make wheat, and also learn what they could accomplish. So that's part of the possibility that biophilic design provides. And when you have this good base begun by design professionals engaging with their clients to set up that platform, this is just one of the many things that can come from it.
And I love that example too. It's the kind of the found opportunities that you maybe didn't expect to get. And I bet those cookies were amazing.
Fantastic.
Best cookies if you grew the wheat yourself, milled it yourself, made it.
Absolutely.
That's such a great example of the whole spectrum of possibilities that can come out of this. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we did for the Bancroft School. The Bancroft School is an organization that works with children with autism and multiple mental disabilities. And they just recently, we completed a campus for them that consists of a school for 265 children, as well as some housing components. It's really a crisis treatment housing. And for this particular school, we used strategies of biophilic design as a sensory strategy to help the children with self-regulation and to improve their learning outcomes. And this was something that was important not just for the children, but also for all of the staff and the adults who work with the children on this campus. With this kind of a population, you have as many adults as you do children on the campus because of the level of care and attention they require throughout the day, as well as all the different kinds of services that they're receiving throughout the course of the day, in addition to, education and schooling. So it was important for us to think about the well-being of staff as well as the well-being of children. And I would argue that when you have a fragile population like this, the outcome and the benefits are even more important and even more impactful than what you might see with more neurotypical children. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I mean by biophilic design strategies. So there's a couple of ways we thought about it on this project. One is in terms of bringing nature into the space through views to nature. This campus has gorgeous tree-lined site. It's actually in the middle of an office park, but once you get into the middle of the campus, you would never know that you're surrounded by office buildings on all the outside sides. So the tree-lined site really became like a wallpaper that we could bring into the building. So views to nature, having daylight in as many spaces as possible, having views from inside of the building through to some of the outdoor spaces like playgrounds and gathering spaces. Having different natural materials inside of the building, inside of spaces themselves, such as water, plant life, as well as natural materials. And then we also thought about the spatial configurations and how they relate to the way that you might experience nature. And this includes some of our innate and learned desires to be able to see beyond our immediate surroundings. So the idea of prospecting, so giving yourself a little bit of a glimpse of what's coming beyond, so that it generates a little bit of a sense of mystery. Having spaces of refuge that you can withdraw from the main flow of the environment, all of the activity. This is particularly important for children with autism, as large spaces can oftentimes be very disorganizing for them. And having things that are obscured and then become surprises, that you come around the corner and you discover something, a really great space. So these are all strategies that we employed. So the organization of the campus, we conceived of it as having kind of a public and private edge to it. So the group of buildings, that dashed line represents a pathway that links together all the buildings that form essentially a private edge. And along that pathway, we grouped all of the elements that became shared experiences and amenities that were important for supporting the education of the children, but also for offering them different sensory experiences throughout the course of the day. So there's training spaces in a vocational village where we allowed, which included some opportunities within a community store that is similar to like a Wawa type store where they could get hands-on training and staff could also buy food. Places for staff to rest and relax in that area, a gym and a pool, which was very important to integrate an element of water, which gives a complete sensory immersion, and to be able to have food also along the way, and some of the other services, medical services that they will require. So that spine sort of formed an edge, and then we had wings for the classrooms that came out from that edge that would then begin to create a little bit more privacy, as well as clear ways to navigate. And one of the great things that we heard after the school opened was that high school students were able to bring the mail to the front office, which maybe doesn't sound like such a great thing unless you're working with a population that doesn't oftentimes have many opportunities to be truly independent, to be able to walk from one part of the building to the other part of the building and to do their job and to be able to do it independently without support. And that it's, was, I think, a really nice thing to hear. So that public and private edge, then, that forms kind of a trail that we wove through the campus. So this is just, upon coming to the building, you begin to see some natural forms, some natural materials, the wood on the underside of the building. We incorporated as much glass as we could throughout the building in order to bring those views into the building. And this is what children, how they start their day, coming into the campus. And in the cafeteria, again, you can get a little bit of a sense here for those views to nature, having the natural wood materials on the roof so that children could enjoy, having a meal in a communal setting, with their classmates in a really beautiful space. And the ability, again, I alluded to this about navigating through the building. So as you come in to the building, you have a clear view from the front door through to some of the spaces beyond, to the playgrounds beyond, which creates a little bit of excitement about, oh, I get to go to the playground, at some point during the course of the day. And you have a very clear sense, I can go this way to the classroom wing and I can go to the left in order to get to the gym or to the pool. And then providing these edges, which are very important to allow someone to be able to sit and think about whether or not I would like to enter the space and maybe have a little bit of an opportunity to see what's beyond. And we used as many natural materials as we could throughout the building, and particularly in those places where somebody would be stopping and they might be resting, or they might be just thinking about, do I want to continue? Do I want to join the activity that's happening within the gym? Alluded to this, the pool is such an amazing amenity for them to have that complete sensory experience of being able to jump in the water and have all of the experience of being in the water and of playing with water, which is a big part of their day and really becomes a real reward for the children on this campus. And then along the pathway through the building, we initially we described it as being like a pearl necklace, that we pulled apart the program elements in order to kind of create these carved out spaces along the main pathway where you could have a little bit of a private environment that has a slightly smaller scale. They can break out here just if somebody needs to rest, take a break from being inside of the classroom, or if they want to do a little bit more one-on-one work, or if they want to offer different kinds of learning experiences. And they were configured to feel a little bit more intimate in scale, and they had different themes. So some of these spaces, this particular one was configured as a library. So you can see some of the books on the shelf, and some of them were configured to be like small kitchens so that you could come and have the opportunity to get some life skills experience. This is an image of the playground that you can see. You can see back in the distance there is that front door, that as you come in, you have this view through to the distance, to the green space beyond, but there's a sense that there's something fun outside that you'll get to do later, and you'll be able to find that on your path. So creating that sense of mystery. And in the outdoor spaces, we also wanted to be able to provide different kinds of scales of experience. Again, having those edges are really important in schools for children with autism, to be able to, the spaces that you can sit on the edge and have proximity without necessarily engaging in activities that, I think probably other people can also appreciate that too, if you're not quite sure if you want to jump on a tricycle, but you want to be able to enjoy some of the views of the space. And of course, being able to literally get out there and get your hands in the dirt and grow things. So there's a whole horticulture program that is also supported with some outdoor learning that gives them the hands-on experiential learning opportunities. I wanted to talk a little bit about outdoor learning. This is an example of something that we just completed here at KSS. The Community Design Collaborative is an organization here in Philadelphia that acts as a liaison between designers, design professionals, and nonprofit groups. And in this case, they were acting as a liaison with the School District of Philadelphia to pull together a set of basically like a guidebook of things that schools can begin to incorporate, so ways that schools can create temporary or permanent outdoor learning spaces. So what we put together was a modular system that would be very flexible depending on how much outdoor space. Jesse alluded to this earlier, urban schools oftentimes don't have a lot of outdoor space. So we wanted to create something that is scalable, that if you do have a lot of outdoor space, you have a module that can be deployed throughout a larger space, or it could be deployed within a parking space to create an outdoor space. So we described them as learning hubs and commons. And so the idea that you start with the ground plane and you just mark out essentially a grid that can be an opportunity to respond informally and introduce an element of play. And then have these elements. We used a milk crate actually as kind of the base building block that could become a base for a shading device. It could become an individual chair. It could become a planter if they would like to do a gardening project. That it supports a whole range of experiences of being outside. And I would venture to bet that this will maybe if some schools do implement this, I would hope that this, might become kind of a long-term curriculum change, that getting the kids outside and getting to do some of their science work in a very different environment would generate, I think, some excitement around the educational opportunity. And the last thing I just wanted to touch on here is that, incorporating biophilia is also a way of adding value to your space. So this is actually a project that Jesse and I are collaborating on now. It's a higher ed environment, and there was a lot of interest on the client side to think about strategies that would pull people into the building, that would draw them, that would create a magnetic space, that you would want to come into this building and be here and not be in your dorm room or in some other space doing work. The nature of a lot of the work that we all do now, as I imagine many of you are experiencing now, is that you can do it anywhere. You can do it on your kitchen table. So why do you want to go back into a building? And incorporating natural materials and the green wall, some of those elements of biophilia, and that opportunity to connect with nature is a very magnetic thing, that the goal is to draw people into the building. So it's a way to add value to your buildings as well.
Absolutely, and just thinking about all these kind of criteria, and one thing I wanted to add on to this is talking about some of the practical concerns, and from the onset is the information gathering that's so necessary to all these processes, is understanding what is the project, what are you trying to do. Thus, that's why we have the charrettes. That's why we're kind of looking at these different uses in these spaces. And that really does have a big impact on how you'll be able to then integrate different green infrastructure components into these built environments. Especially when it comes to things like green roofs and living walls, there's an array of assemblages that need to be understood to integrate them into a building, and they can be. It's so doable to add these biophilic elements, but there are still important factors to be understood, such as the need to understand specific building code criteria, such as is there stormwater management criteria, practical concerns such as lighting, water availability, and compatibility of materials, and then factors such as weight capacities in terms of structure. What is it going to be used for? The programming that will really inform kind of plant selection, what you want to do with this space, and then how you maintain it. So those early on charrettes, understanding the end user's needs and how you can build towards that, all becomes really important. And in this slide here too, just the example of what is the exact assemblage, so you can understand how it's going to be integrated in. And so for all these reasons, going back to kind of pulling in expertise, is that architects and green roof professionals are often happy to help provide insight and help guide that path, as with the WELL standards as well. It's a path that can be charted, and there's a lot of options within that. And in the next couple of slides, what I'm going to show too is kind of speaking to that array of options you have. This is a green roof that's 3 inches deep. It's 15 pounds fully saturated the weight, and this is a wildflower meadow in Indianapolis. The next roof is the exact same buildup. It is a 3-inch deep system, the same weight, but it's a lawn for private residents. And the next roof you're going to see, again, that same buildup, same weight, but this is growing kale. This is a Chicago After Schools Matters program working with students where they wanted to grow crops to harvest for their lunches and to see what it was like to actually do that. I love these 3 roofs because I think they really get to understanding the radically different outcomes you can get just by making a few small changes. In this case, it's just the plant material that's been changed. The cost is relatively the same, the buildup and weights, the compatibility, but you're getting radically different programming. I think it's a really powerful aspect of these types of technology, of biophilia in general, is that there's many ways you can program it and make it work for different sites with just a few changes when you understand how those changes will impact it. And vice versa, there can be negative outcomes. We were looking at a project, and this is one which had a sedum roof, which is a great plant, but it's a sun-loving plant, and it was a heavily shaded site. And so the plant kept failing. They kept trying to get it to grow. It was causing maintenance headaches for the staff involved. This is the Big Ten headquarters outside of Chicago. So university staff from all over would come over, and they were looking at this saying, what is this supposed to be? They kept having to pay to rebuild it. They called us to take a look at this, see if we could help with the system. And we just proposed, what if we change the plants and use plants that are more appropriate for a shade setting? So if that'll work, go for it. And so they allowed us to make that relatively small change, both in terms of cost in terms of maintenance, and the result was a vastly superior kind of aesthetic view. And next slide, you'll see kind of how it came together. This was just by putting in shade plants. Not only did that make it look better, but importantly, the maintenance suddenly completely changed. It was no longer about fighting to make something work that inherently didn't want to work, but working with something that was going to do most of the work on its own because it was happy with those conditions. And thoughtful biophilic design, I think, does the same thing. It works with the building, it works with the end users to augment programming to build upon it and not become a headache that is constantly something you're fighting. And another really important practical concern is I always want to touch on, one final slide, is the importance of understanding that the maintenance and the human aspect of these biophilic environments. We love green infrastructure. I love green roofs, love living walls, I love trees. But really importantly, the biophilic big component is the people component. How are people going to be interacting with it? How are they going to be tied into this? So this is one of our maintenance techs walking on a roof, looking at this. This is also a farm in the West Loop of Chicago. And so his maintenance activities aren't just seeing if it's working. He will be harvesting tomatoes, potatoes. There's apple trees on this roof and selling them. One reason we do that often is have these farm components. It draws people to them. And we know through many studies that green infrastructure that has a human component where people are either doing activities on the roof or directly adjacent where they can see the roof, those are the systems that are most likely to succeed and the fewest types of maintenance issues. It's roofs that are put places where humans never interact with them. They're put up on top of the building where no one's seeing the vegetation, no one's interacting with it. Those are the green roofs that tend to have the most issues. So one important aspect, I think, kind of end on with the biophilic component of green infrastructure is the human component. Making these spaces where there's levels of interaction tend not to allow you to get more out of it in terms of programming and therefore more value, but also tend to result in better green infrastructure because more attention is being paid to it. People are more willing to invest in it. And so the maintenance component can really be an asset and not just a cost for a facilities team to consider.
All right. So we just wanted to close with a couple of resources here. Angela, do you want to describe some of the things that folks can find online if they want to learn a little bit?
Absolutely, yes. And thank you so much, Mava and Jesse, for those brilliant examples. From boiling from a huge holistic strategy to really honing in on those biophilic elements is really inspiring to see how it connects back to that human element. We hope that all of you who tuned in today were equally inspired and ready to take some next steps. I wanted to alert you of a completely free COVID-19 teacher training that is available online at www.teachers.iwbi.com. This was developed with support from McGraw-Hill, 21st Century School Fund, the Basic Coalition, and the National Council on School Facilities to really inform and equip teachers in this really critical time about how to communicate effectively with your students about COVID, how to keep your classrooms safe, how to keep your students safe. So we hope that you will check it out or share it with a teacher in your life to have them check it out. And then next slide, if you were interested in learning more about the WELL rating system, the WELL Health Safety rating system, if you are tuning into this later and you're seeing commercials on TV and wondering, what is this system? I just wanted to do a quick blurb. So next slide, to orient you with exactly what that program entails. So it's the response to the moment that we're in that's looking at a third-party way to verify compliance with safer operational policies, maintenance protocols, emergency plans, and communicating in transparency through stakeholder engagement and education. So on the next slide, you'll see the example of the health safety rating seal. There are a number of school districts that are applying this at scale, which is really exciting to me. And we hope that you will visit us online, get in touch with us if you have any questions, actually get in touch with all three of us. If you have any questions, we're sharing our contact information with you. And thank you again for tuning in. I hope that this was a meaningful discussion for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.